I'm with Shaul Rotman, who was a child living in Germany. Now, Shaul, what was life like living as a child in Germany?
I told you that we went to Poland, to Przemyśl, to see my father's family. And then my father made all the arrangements to go to Eretz Israel, but it was the 19th of November or October, when the Nazis attacked all the synagogues, and also the synagogue we went to, and ruined them totally. But this one belonged to the Jewish community in Berlin, and they saved it. It was not ruined, but it stood, and people could come to pray there as Erev Shabbat and so on. And my brother was a member of the choir in the synagogue, and my father and I went on Friday night and Saturday morning to the synagogue. After this event is Kristallnacht. They couldn't warm it up during the winter, and my father said that you can't come with me. My father went there until he was captured by the Germans. And my brother, until he went to England, to London, left also this place, so we split. My father was in a concentration camp. My brother was in England, nearly 15 years old, and I stayed with my mother. My mother was very active in releasing my father from the concentration camp. And we had a certificate sent to the British government, and it was sent to him, but he had to leave Berlin, and he signed only half of them. The reason that it was stopped, I'm to blame. Why? Because in the certificate my brother was written, his name, and my name was not there. So there were questions how to arrange it, but the British Council didn't sign it. But because we had this nearly assurance that we have a certificate, they released my father from the concentration camp, but on condition, 2 weeks you must disappear from Germany. So my father lost 30 kilos, but we hardly recognized him. If people in 3 months or something like that leave such an amount of kilos, he was lying in bed for a few days. He couldn't remember but he had to leave Germany. So he went to the administration which left after the most not Israelis, Jews from Palestine left this place, but they knew his activity and all this, and they said that, okay, go to Slovakia, and there is ranging, let's say, a few hundred Jews from Germany and others from all around, from Czechia, from other small countries, and they will have a boat to go to Israel. Unfortunately, it was a very old ship, It was constructed in the 19th century, and they had many problems to prepare it for these people, but they went on the Danube to go to the Black Sea, and there they had to charge something or do something. They were captured by one of those countries which are on the Danube. I can't remember now what it was. I think Bulgaria. And they didn't let them go out from the boat. They had to be at the boat. And when we came to the same place, our leaders made every effort, and with help of other countries, they released their ship and let them go. And I saw my father waving with both hands, and so I recognized him. And I thought that it's the last time I'll see my father. And they went on to the Black Sea, past the Dardanelles in Turkey, and they had to stop in Greece, not in Greece, and one of the islands of Greece. Greece has many, many islands, and those who could swim made a long rope and carried as they could to an island which is not no people on it. And later on they continued to collect materials which they need, and they stayed there 13 days. They made by night fires and were sending what they could, I don't know how, but anyhow, the Italians discovered them. The Italian planes discovered them, and the next day they sent a boat. It's a ship, it's called, and took them to the Isle of Rhodos. And they were there in a camp. And my father ate, yes, and they got between many things leather. And my father prepared a very nice women's bag, yes, for women. And the governor of the Isle of Rhodes presented it in shop in Rhodos. And so when the Italian government asked them to come to Italy, and they decided that's the best thing to do, the leader of this island told my father, stay here, you can have a job, and you can... my father was responsible for the group who comes from Germany. And he said, I have here 400 people, and I'm responsible for them, and I go with them. And that was the best decision for him, because half a year later, the Nazis came to the Isle of Rhodes and killed all the Jews in a football place. And so he was saved. He was in Italy in a camp in Ferramonti. It's on nearly the tip, the southern tip of Italy. And they were, yes, there was decision with the Germans. The Germans said to send them to Poland, to the camps, to termination. But the Pope, who was not very pro-Israeli or pro-Jews, said no, they'll stay here. So when the world was anti-Pope, my father used to say, he saved my life. Anyhow, when Italy was invaded by the British army in the south, they found this camp. There were thousands of people, not all Jews, but all kind. And they said those from Palestine we release them, we send them whatever they want. And the group of 400 Jews came to Israel. No, it was not. It was the British Mandate, yes. The war stopped 45. And in July 45, my father was sent with all those who want to go to Eretz Israel, were sent to Egypt. And from Egypt, they went on train to Athlete. But they passed through Rehovot. I was in Rehovot with the family. And we were finished school. It was July 14 or the 7th, I can't remember. And it was Friday. So we went to the train stop, the station in Rehovot, to see them. And they said, the train will not stop in Rehovot. So I left. I didn't know that it's my father in there. But anyhow, I went to my aunt, and my father was very surprised that no one in Rehovot comes to see him. But it was Friday. Saturday we went to Athlete, and we saw them for about 500 meters, but he was still waving with his hands, and we saw him. And he was in Athlete until the next Friday and released by the British because they were legal commerce. And that's how I met my father after 5 years.
Wow. How did you get to Eretz Israel?
So now I'll tell you about Patria. We arrived in Palestine, in Haifa, in November 1941. The war was for 2 years, and we escaped from Germany because a German policeman, he was anti-Nazis, and he helped us in several actions when we needed help. For instance, most of the people who helped us were not Jews. For instance, there were this shop, Makolet, food. We bought food, not those who should be kosher, but we used to buy, and he said,
have the food coupons, but they were still able to buy food because non-Jews were helping.
So we got everything we needed, and he brought us to a home. The stuff, so we shouldn't. It was not necessary to go to his shop. We phoned him. Those days we had the telephone, and he delivered it. Anyhow, we survived. And then my mother heard that there is going illegal boat to Israel, to Palestine, or Eretz Israel, you want to call it wherever you want to. They said to her, listen, we know you, and you know how your husband was helpful, but we don't take children. We don't take any children except if they are 10 years older than me. Anyhow, this policeman, I told you, was not German, and he helped Jews. And I think that he got voted later on. But anyhow, he went to the Jewish agency, and he said, I promised Mr. Rotman that his wife, with the first ship going to Palestine, they were on it. And he shouted at them, and they were afraid, although he was a sergeant or something like that. And they accepted me. We were a few children from Germany who joined our trip. And then all of a sudden we got a notice to be ready Shabbat to come to the railway and go to Vienna. So we met my grandfather and one of my mother's brother who lived with his father, and we went to the railway station. We went to Vienna, but we were in one
The carriage of the train.
yes, and
Compartment. The
Sure.
captain from the army. He's talking about a captain from the German army came into their compartment when they were travelling by the train from Berlin to Vienna.
And he was nice. He wanted to be nice to me and spoke with me and asked me. And when he asked me what school I went, I knew that I shouldn't say Jewish. So I embraced my mother and didn't say. And my mother said, yes, he is shy. And so I passed it. I was afraid because he was not a policeman, but you never know what can be there. Anyhow, as we arrived in Vienna, I was 6.5 years old. Anyhow, we came to Vienna. We were there less than 3 weeks, and we entered boats who took tourists to the Vienna, and the boats were ready to go on the Danube. And
He says they sailed on that boat, all the Jews sailed on that boat from Vienna, and they went down the Danube River, which flows all the way down to Romania, to the Black Sea. The Jewish refugees.
anyhow, we went there to
They arrived there and they didn't have a lot of money. His mother had very little money, but they were allowed to buy food, what they could, from people that were selling things there. So they bought corn on the cob. They call it in German Kukuruz.
Yes, and we stayed there a long time because there were 3 boats, and we were sent to one boat who was nearly full. And I was from the German group, I was nearly the only child there. Yes, but we were on those.
Where they were sleeping, it was like just a shelf. They were bunk beds, like shelves, one above the other. And when one person rolled over, everybody else had to roll over as well. And they were there for months in these really cramped conditions.
But it was nice because it was near an entrance where cool air entered. Because those who were underneath us in the lower
levels
decks, then they suffered. And for me it was nice that I could get up and go to the deck. So I spent many time on the deck where there also were people working with they had bowls, filled it with seawater and helped you wash your hands and so on. But we had one that it could be an accident. They asked us to come to the deck, and they were singing new songs and so on. But the people were on one side of the boat, and those who performed were on the other side. But people are much people and only few. So it started to sink. And the captain came and said, Abudi, Abudi, I don't know what it means till now. And as he was shouting, the people that went to the other side with the performers, so the ship didn't sink. But I was in a panic. My mother was not with me, and You know, children want somebody close to you. And I was very panicked. But anyhow, we entered the Black Sea, which was more stormy and not so quiet as the Danube. And we stopped it several times to get some food, fresh material. And our captain, although we were the last boat from these three to leave Romania, we didn't stop at Cyprus, and we entered Haifa at the 1st of October. And, or was it November? Anyhow, we were transported to the ship of Patria, where it was much easier because my mother and I had a special...
They had their own cabin, but they still had the problem that they couldn't have too many people on one side of the ship, otherwise the ship would start to tip. So the people had to move from one side of the ship to the other to keep it balanced in the water. The British wouldn't let the Jews enter Israel. It was because of their policies there that they wouldn't allow them to enter. So they transferred them to this ship called the Patria because they wanted to transport them down to the southern part of Africa and put them in a prison on the island of Mauritius, which is off the coast of Southeast Africa.
Anyhow, from two ships where we came from Europe to Palestine, were planned to be transported to Africa, and the third one came later, and only 100 or 200 people were transported to this ship, Patria, and they were decided in the end of November to go to Africa. But Haganah, the defenders, the illegal army, which we were in creation in those days, Haganah, and they brought a bomb into the machinery of the boat. But it was bigger than the engineers ordered. But nobody had experience to know exactly the quantities of this material. Anyhow, it exploded, and we were on the deck because they said that it was Friday, and they said that they have some announcements for us. And then at about 9:30, there was an explosion, and the ship was sinking. And we were on the deck. We were in a place where there were officers and not allowed for people to be there. And I was with my mother, and one of from the Far East heard us shouting, and he lifted me up. After I told the family story, what happened to us, it wasn't easy, and for a child 6 years old to lose his brother and his father and be with the mother, and what happened to us and that Patria was, how do you say it? It was a bomb in it. And the Patria sank within 15 minutes. And we were on the deck. It was it was better than the ship. We were away from the Danube until Haifa. But anyhow, we were evacuated. Our ship was the last to leave the Danube and the first to arrive in Eretz Israel. So the ship sank, and I was with my mother, and I didn't like crowds, so I took my mother and said, let's go there are officers above the deck. and we'll see if we can get away and not running with all the people who were pushing, and we went in. It was not allowed for the Jews to go there, the passengers go there, but it was empty. And I went with my mother, and if passage sank so, then you are on the wall, not...
So the ship turned on its
side. Yes. But we could see the sky. So I started shouting in German, rettet ein Kind.
Yeah, rescue a child. Rescue the child.
Yes. So there was one of the workers from the Far East, not high enough, and he reached a hand to me and lifted me up, and I stayed outside on the wall of the ship, and then he started to rescue my mother. And my mother is not tall as I am, and he was not tall, he was from the Far East, and he couldn't reach her. And he tried once and twice and 3 times, and he reached part of her hand, but it wasn't enough to lift her, although she wasn't a fat woman. Anyhow, I was holding his feet. I didn't let him go, which is obvious. I lost my father, I lost my brother, and now I'm losing my mother. So I didn't let him go. But then he tried again. Anyhow, it was very scary to lose my mother, and he succeeded to lift her up. And we were going on the side of the ship to the water, and there came a boat which serves fresh water for the ships. And we were going there. It was dangerous to slip there. Anyhow, we reached the boat. It was still nearly empty, and I jumped and then reached my hand to save my mother. And people were holding her feet and didn't let her to enter the boat. So she had to put off the shoes, and she was saved, and all the people came afterwards, because it was the place where people could climb to this boat, the water boat. And she came without shoes to Haifa, and the British prepared sandwiches with sausage and prepared tea with milk, and we were keeping kosher. But my mother said, you have to eat. My mother did not. She didn't eat the sandwiches, bowls, but she wanted me to eat. So after a few hours, we stayed on the boat. They didn't let us go anywhere. We were circled by British police, but we were saved. But anyhow, in the evening, they took us to Atlit and to the camp, and we stayed there about 7.5 months. They wanted to separate us. I am not a woman, so I have to go to the other side. And my mother said, I'm not leaving a child 6.5 years old by himself to the other part of the boat. There was a ship. So I was with the women for 7.5 months. Yes. No, but it was a barrack for 50 people. And there were women who were against it. But my mother said, I don't leave the child. So I stayed, but after a few months, we learned Hebrew, and after a few months, they asked me to come to the men's part only to study Jewish religion. So I went there. I didn't like it because I had a very good teacher, a woman, for the group of children who were there. And I had to go and have the stories which I was 6.5 years old. I didn't like it. But I stayed there as only during the day. Afterwards, I was returning to my mother. And after 7.5 months, we left. My mother was going to she had a brother next to Rehovot, and she got a job in Gdera, where she could speak German because she didn't know Hebrew, and because most of the people were past medical help and so on, and they came to the summer to Gdera because they said it's a very good weather there for you. Anyhow, that was July, and August passed, and I went to school. And at that school, they decided to put me in Kita Aleph, the first, and my age was over 7. My birthday is in March, so it was difficult for me to be nearly the oldest pupil at school. But I decided one thing, to speak only Hebrew, except my mother. With her I spoke in German. Anyhow, that was my story. Wow. Yes, but I told you that my father was released in July 1944, because that was the time the British released southern Italy, and my father we got a flat in Sha'araim, which is place where the
Yemenite Jews.
Yeah.
It was very crowded and difficult with a lot of Yemenite Jewish families, and everybody squashed in together.
It was not good relations, although that they were wonderful to us. They helped, and only once we prepared warm water on Friday afternoon. My father opened a shop in Rehovot, and we all took a shower. And because my father put also leather in the boiler, and in the morning, Shabbat was
smoke.
And there was a concentration. What you do with fire on Shabbat, but we explained it, and the relations were wonderful.
Do you remember when Israel became a nation in 1948?
The nation was in 48. Independence Day. Yes, it was. There were the demonstrations before it, and that's the reason that I started reading newspapers from the neighbors. We had not enough money to buy a newspaper, but I got it in the afternoon, and there was another family who was at the same yard, and they also read it. Anyhow, I was very young when I started reading, not for children. I read before. My mother used to pay for it. Yes, but anyhow, I was very interested in all what's going on during the war, and I had maps, and I searched wherever I could, because when I came to Israel, I was in fear that the Germans are following us.
I was afraid the Germans, the Nazis, would get close to where he was now in Israel, and that they wouldn't be safe because the Italian forces were in the north and the Germans had been in Egypt, and he was quite scared they were going to come for them again.
I was very afraid that the Germans are following us, and at first the Italians in Lebanon. Yes, and then Egypt, and they conquered also North Africa, and they entered Egypt. I was scared that the Germans were following me. Anyhow, but when the Independence Day, I was in Rehovot, I went to the center of Rehovot. There, my father got a job at the center of, but it wasn't the shop. It was an entrance if they build more stories about very little shop. Yes, and this shop, my father was very proud. It was a very good center. But afterwards, the economic situation was hard, and they had these nekudot, these papers, where you can buy or shoes or a baggage for the children to school. And everyone chose the shoes and everything made of leather and not school bag. So it was very hard for them.
Well, Shaul, thank you very much for sharing. It's a wonderful, wonderful story.